We are still in the neighborhood of the most important part of this lesson. Therefore, think and assimilate as you pass over these pages. The law of increasing returns is no invention of mine, nor do I lay claim to the discovery of the principle of rendering more service and better service than paid for as a means of utilizing this law. I merely appropriated them, after many years of careful observation of those forces which enter into the attainment of success, just as you will appropriate them after you understand their significance. You might begin this appropriation process now by trying an experiment which may easily open your eyes and place back of your efforts powers that you did not know you possessed. Let me caution you, however, not to attempt this experiment in the same spirit in which a certain woman experimented with that biblical passage which says something to the effect that if you have faith the size of a grain of mustard, and say to yonder mountain be removed to some other place, it will be removed. This woman lived near a high mountain that she could see from her front door. Therefore, as she retired that night, she commanded the mountain to remove itself to some other place. Next morning she jumped out of bed, rushed to the door and looked out, but lo, the mountain was still there. Then she said, just as I had expected, I knew it would be there. I'm going to ask you to approach this experiment with full faith that it will mark one of the most important turning points of your entire life. I'm going to ask you to make the object of this experiment the removal of a mountain that is standing where your temple of success should stand, but where it never can stand until you have removed the mountain. You may never have noticed the mountain to which I refer, but it is standing there in your way just the same, unless you have already discovered and removed it. And what is this mountain? You ask. It is the feeling that you have been cheated unless you receive material pay for all the service you render. That feeling may be unconsciously expressing itself and destroying the very foundation of your temple of success in scores of ways that you have not observed. In the very lowly bred type of humanity, this feeling usually seeks outward expression in terms something like this. I am not paid to do this, and I'll be blankety blankety, blank if I'll do it. You know the type to which reference is made. You have met with it many times, but you have never found a single person of this type who was successful, and you never will. Success must be attracted through understanding and application of laws which are as immutable as is the law of gravitation. It cannot be driven into the corner and captured as one would capture a wild steer. For this reason, you are requested to enter into the following experiment with the object of familiarizing yourself with one of the most important of these laws, namely, the law of increasing returns. The experiment. During the next 6 months, make it your business to render useful service to at least one person every day, for which you neither expect nor accept monetary pay. Go at this experiment with faith that it will uncover for your use one of the most powerful laws that enter into the achievement of enduring success, and you will not be disappointed. The rendering of this service may take on any one of more than a score of forms. For example, it may be rendered personally to one or more specific persons, or it may be rendered to your employer in the nature of work that you perform after hours. Again, it may be rendered to entire strangers whom you never expect to see again. It matters not to whom you render this service, so long as you render it with willingness, and solely for the purpose of benefiting others. If you carry out this experiment in the proper attitude of mind, you will discover that which all others who have become familiar with the law upon which it is based have discovered, namely, that you can no more render service without receiving compensation than you can withhold the rendering of it without suffering the loss of reward. Cause and effect, means and ends, seed and fruit, cannot be severed, says Emerson. For the effect already blooms in the cause, the end pre-exists in the means, the fruit in the seed. If you serve an ungrateful master, serve him the more. Put God in your debt. Every stroke shall be repaid. The longer the payment is withholden, the better for you. For compound interest on compound interest is the rate and usage of this exchequer. The law of nature is, do the thing, and you shall have the power, but they who do not the thing have not the power. Men suffer all their life long, under the foolish superstition that they can be cheated. But it is as impossible for a man to be cheated by anyone but himself, as for a thing to be, and not to be, at the same time. There is a third silent party to all our bargains. The nature and soul of things takes on itself the guarantee of fulfillment of every contract, so that honest service cannot come to loss. Before you begin the experiment that you have been requested to undertake, read Emerson's essay on compensation, for it will go a very long way toward helping you to understand why you are making the experiment. Perhaps you have read Compensation before. Read it again. One of the strange phenomena that you will observe about this essay may be found in the fact that every time you read it you will discover new truths that you did not notice during previous readings. A few years ago, I was invited to deliver the graduation address before the students of an Eastern college. During my address, I dwelt at length, and with all the emphasis at my command, on the importance of rendering more service and better service than that for which one is paid. After the address was delivered, the president and the secretary of the college invited me to luncheon. While we were eating, the secretary turned to the president and said, "I have just found out what this man is doing. He is putting himself ahead in the world by first helping others to get ahead." In that brief statement, he had epitomized the most important part of my philosophy on the subject of success. It is literally true that you can succeed best and quickest by helping others to succeed. Some 10 years ago, when I was engaged in the advertising business, I built my entire clientele by the application of the fundamentals upon which this lesson is founded. By having my name placed on the follow-up list of various mail order houses, I received their sales literature. When I received a sales letter or a booklet or a folder which I believed I could improve, I went right to work on it and made the improvement, then sent it back to the firm that had sent it to me, with a letter stating that this was but a trifling sample of what I could do, that there were plenty of other good ideas where that one came from, and that I would be glad to render regular service for a monthly fee. Invariably, this brought an order for my services. On one occasion, I remember that the firm was dishonest enough to appropriate my idea and use it without paying me for it, but this turned out to be an advantage to me in this way. A member of the firm who was familiar with the transaction started another business, and as a result of the work I had done for his former associates, for which I was not paid, he engaged me to serve him, on a basis that paid me more than double the amount I would have realized from his original firm. Thus the law of compensation gave back to me, and with compound interest added, that which I had lost by rendering service to those who were dishonest. If I were looking for a profitable field of employment today, I could find it by again putting into action this plan of rewriting sales literature as a means of creating a market for my services. Perhaps I would find others who would appropriate my ideas without paying for them. But by and large, people would not do this for the simple reason that it would be more profitable to them to deal fairly with me and thereby avail themselves of my continued services. Several years ago, I was invited to deliver a lecture before the students of the Palmer School at Davenport, Iowa. My manager completed arrangements for me to accept the invitation under the regular terms in effect at that time, which were $100 for the lecture and my traveling expenses. When I arrived at Davenport, I found a reception committee awaiting me at the depot, and that evening I was given one of the warmest welcomes I had ever received during my public career up to that time. I met many delightful people from whom I gathered many valuable facts that were of benefit to me. Therefore, when I was asked to make out my expense account so the school could give me a check, I told them that I had received my pay many times over, by that which I had learned while I was there. I refused my fee and returned to my office in Chicago, feeling well repaid for the trip. The following morning, Dr. Palmer went before the 2,000 students of his school and announced what I had said about feeling repaid by what I had learned, and added, "In the 20 years that I have been conducting this school, I have had scores of speakers address the student body, but this is the first time I ever knew a man to refuse his fee because he felt that he had been repaid for his services in other ways. This man is the editor of a national magazine, and I advise every one of you to subscribe for that magazine, because such a man as this must have much that each of you will need when you go into the field and offer your services." By the middle of that week, I had received more than $6,000 for subscriptions to the magazine of which I was editor. And during the following 2 years, these same 2,000 students and their friends sent in more than $50,000 for subscriptions. Tell me, if you can, how or where I could have invested $100 as profitably as this, by refusing to accept my $100 fee and thereby setting the law of increasing returns to work in my behalf? We go through two important periods in this life. One is that period during which we are gathering, classifying, and organizing knowledge, and the other is that period during which we are struggling for recognition. We must first learn something, which requires more effort than most of us are willing to put into the job, but after we have learned much that can be of useful service to others, we are still confronted with the problem of convincing them that we can serve them. One of the most important reasons why we should always be not only ready but willing to render service is the fact that every time we do so, we gain thereby another opportunity to prove to someone that we have ability. We go just one more step toward gaining the necessary recognition that we must all have. Instead of saying to the world, "Show me the color of your money and I will show you what I can do," reverse the rule and say, "Let me show you the color of my service so that I may take a look at the color of your money if you like my service." In 1917, a certain woman who was then nearing the 50-year milepost of life was working as a stenographer at $15 a week. Judging by the salary, she must have been none too competent in that work. Now note this change. Last year, this same woman cleared a little over $100,000 on the lecture platform. What bridged that mighty chasm between these two earning capacities? You ask, and I answer, the habit of performing more service and better service than that for which she was paid, thereby taking advantage of the law of increasing returns. This woman is well known throughout the country, as she is now a prominent lecturer on the subject of applied psychology. Let me show you how she harnessed the law of increasing returns. First, she goes into a city and delivers a series of 15 free lectures. All may attend who will, without money and without price. During the delivery of these 15 lectures, she has the opportunity of selling herself to her audience, and at the end of the series, she announces the formation of a class for which she charges $25 per student. That's all there is to her plan. Where she is commanding a small fortune for a year's work, there are scores of much more proficient lecturers who are barely getting enough from their work to pay their expenses, simply because they have not yet familiarized themselves with the fundamentals upon which this lesson is based, as she has done. Now, I would like to have you stop right here and answer this question. If a 50-year-old woman, who has no extraordinary qualifications, can harness the law of increasing returns and make it raise her from the position as stenographer at $15 a week to that of lecturer at over $100,000 a year, why cannot you apply this same law so that it will give you advantages that you do not now possess? Never mind what is to come in the remainder of this lesson until you have answered this question, and answered it as it should be answered. You are struggling, either meekly or earnestly, to make a place for yourself in the world. Perhaps you are exerting enough effort to bring you success of the highest order, if that effort were coupled with and supported by the law of increasing returns. For this reason, you owe it to yourself to find out just how you can apply this law to best advantage. Now go back to that question, again, for I am determined that you shall not pass it by lightly, without giving yourself the benefit of at least trying to answer it. In other words, there is no mistaking the fact that you are being brought face to face with a question that vitally affects your future, and if you evade it, the fault will be with you. You may lay this lesson aside after you have read it, and it is your privilege to do so, without making any attempt to profit by it. But, if you do so, you will never again be able to look at yourself in a mirror without being haunted by the feeling that you have deliberately cheated yourself. Perhaps this is telling the truth in an undiplomatic way, but when you purchased this course on the law of success, you did so because you wanted facts, and you were getting them, without the embellishment of apology. After you have finished this lesson, if you will go back and review the lessons on initiative and leadership and enthusiasm, you will better understand those lessons. Those lessons in this one clearly establish the necessity of taking the initiative, following it with aggressive action, and doing more than you were paid to do. If you will burn the fundamentals of these 3 lessons into your consciousness, you will be a changed person. And I make this statement regardless of who you are or what your calling may be. If this plain language has made you angry, I am glad, for it indicates that you can be moved. Now, if you would profit by the counsel of one who has made many more mistakes than you ever made, and for that reason learned a few of the fundamental truths of life, harness this anger and focus it on yourself until it drives you forth to render the service of which you are capable. If you will do this, you can collect a king's ransom as your reward. Now let us turn our attention to still another important feature of this habit of performing more service and better service than that for which we are paid, namely, the fact that we can develop this habit without asking for permission to do so. Such service may be rendered through your own initiative, without the consent of any person. You do not have to consult those to whom you render the service, for it is a privilege over which you have entire control. There are many things you could do that would tend to promote your interests, but most of them require the cooperation or the consent of others. If you render less service than that for which you are paid, you must do so by leave of the purchaser of the service, or the market for your service will soon cease. I want you to get the full significance of this right of prerogative, which you have, to render more service and better service than that for which you are paid, for this places squarely upon your shoulders the responsibility of rendering such service. And if you fail to do so, you have a plausible excuse to offer or an alibi upon which to fall back, if you fail in the achievement of your definite chief aim in life. One of the most essential yet the hardest truths that I have had to learn is that every person should be his own hardest taskmaster. We are all fine builders of alibis and creators of excuses in support of our shortcomings. We are not seeking facts and truths as they are, but as we wish them to be. We prefer honeyed words of flattery to those of cold, unbiased truth, wherein lies the weakest spot of the man-animal. Furthermore, we are up in arms against those who dare to uncover the truth for our benefit. One of the most severe shocks I received in the early part of my public career was the knowledge that men are still being crucified for the high crime of telling the truth. I recall an experience I had some 10 years ago with a man who had written a book advertising his business school. He submitted this book to me and paid me to review it and give him my candid opinion of it. I reviewed the book with painstaking care, then did my duty by showing him wherein I believed the book was weak. Here I learned a great lesson, for that man became so angry that he has never forgiven me for allowing him to look at his book through my eyes. When he asked me to tell him frankly what criticism I had to offer of the book, what he really meant was that I should tell him what I saw in the book that I could compliment. That's human nature for you. We court flattery more than we do the truth. I know, because I am human. All of which is in preparation for the unkindest cut of all that I am duty-bound to inflict upon you, namely, to suggest that you have not done as well as you might have done for the reason that you have not applied a sufficient amount of truth set out in Lesson 8 on self-control to charge yourself with your own mistakes and shortcomings. To do this takes self-control and plenty of it. If you paid some person who had the ability and the courage to do it $100 to strip you of your vanity and conceit and love for flattery, so that you might see the weakest part of your makeup, the price would be reasonable enough. We go through life stumbling and falling and struggling to our knees, and struggling and falling some more, making asses of ourselves, and going down, finally, in defeat, largely because we either neglect or flatly refuse to learn the truth about ourselves. Since I have come to discover some of my own weaknesses through my work of helping others discover theirs, I blush with shame when I take a retrospective view of life and think how ridiculous I must have seemed in the eyes of those who could see me as I wouldn't see myself. We parade before the enlarged shadows of our own vanity and imagine that those shadows are our real selves, while the few knowing souls with whom we meet stand in the background and look at us with pity or with scorn. Hold on a minute when I am not through with you yet. You have paid me to delve into the depths of your real self and give you an introspective inventory of what is there, and I am going to do the job right, as nearly as I can. Not only have you been fooling yourself as to the real cause of your failures of the past, but you have tried to hang these causes on the door of someone else. When things did not go to suit you, instead of accepting full responsibility for the cause, you have said, "Oh, hang this job. I don't like the way they are treating me, so I'm going to quit." Don't deny it. Now let me whisper a little secret in your ear, a secret which I have had to gather from grief and heartaches and unnecessary punishment of the hardest sort, instead of quitting the job because there were obstacles to master and difficulties to be overcome. You should have faced the facts, and then you would have known that life itself is just one long series of mastery of difficulties and obstacles. The measure of a man may be taken very accurately by the extent to which he adapts himself to his environment and makes it his business to accept responsibility for every adversity with which he meets, whether the adversity grows out of a cause within his control or not. Now, if you feel that I have panned you rather severely, have pity on me, O fellow wayfarer. For you surely must know that I have had to punish myself more sorely than I have punished you before I learned the truth that I am here passing on to you for your use and guidance. I have a few enemies, thank God for them. For they have been vulgar and merciless enough to say some things about me that forced me to rid myself of some of my most serious shortcomings, mainly those which I did not know I possessed. I have profited by the criticism of these enemies without having to pay them for their services in dollars, although I have paid in other ways. However, it was not until some years ago that I caught sight of some of my most glaring faults which were brought to my attention as I studied Emerson's essay on compensation, particularly the following part of it. Our strength grows out of our weakness. Not until we are pricked and stung and sorely shot at, awakens the indignation which arms itself with secret forces. A great man is always willing to be little. While he sits on the cushion of advantage, he goes to sleep. When he is pushed, tormented, defeated, he has a chance to learn something. He has been put on his wits, on his manhood. He has gained facts, learned his ignorance, is cured of the insanity of conceit, has got moderation and real skill. The wise man always throws himself on the side of his assailants. It is more his interest than it is theirs to find his weak point. Blame is safer than praise. I hate to be defended in a newspaper. As long as all that is said against me, I feel a certain assurance of success. But as soon as honeyed words of praise are spoken of me, I feel as one that lies unprotected before his enemies. Study this, the philosophy of the immortal Emerson, for it may serve as a modifying force that will temper your mettle and prepare you for the battles of life, as carbon tempers the steel. If you are a very young person, you need to study it all the more, for it often requires the stern realities of many years of experience to prepare one to assimilate and apply this philosophy. Better that you should understand these great truths as a result of my undiplomatic presentation of them than to be forced to gather them from the less sympathetic sources of cold experience. Experience is a teacher that knows no favorites. When I permit you to profit by the truths I have gathered from the teachings of this cold and unsympathetic teacher called experience, I am doing my best to show you favoritism, which reminds me, somewhat, of the times when my father used to do his duty by me, in the woodshed, always starting with this bit of encouraging philosophy: "Son, this hurts me worse than it does you." Thus we approach the close of this lesson without having exhausted the possibilities of the subject, nay, without having more than scratched the surface of it. There comes to my mind the story of a romance of long ago through which I can leave in your mind the main import of this lesson. This story had its setting in the city of Antioch, in ancient Rome, 2,000 years ago, when the great city of Jerusalem and all the land of Judea were under the oppressive heel of Rome. The star figure of the story was a young Jew by the name of Ben-Hur, who was falsely accused of crime and sentenced to hard labor at the galleys or chained to a bench in the galley, and being forced to tug wearily at the oars, Ben-Hur developed a powerful body. Little did his tormentors know that out of his punishment would grow the strength with which he would one day gain his freedom. Perhaps Ben-Hur, himself, had no such hopes. Then came the day of the chariot races, the day that was destined to break the chains that bound Ben-Hur to the oars of the galley and give him his freedom. One span of horses was without a driver. In desperation, the owner sought the aid of the young slave because of his mighty arms, and begged him to take the place of the missing driver. As Ben-Hur picked up the reins, a mighty cry went up from the onlookers. "Look! Look! Those arms! Where did you get them?" they howled, and Ben-Hur answered, "At the galley's oar." The race was on. With those mighty arms, Ben-Hur calmly drove that charging span of horses on to victory, victory that won for him his freedom. Life, itself, is a great chariot race, and the victory goes only to those who have developed the strength of character and determination and will power to win. What matters is that we develop this strength through cruel confinement at the galleys, or, as long as we use it so that it brings us, finally, to victory and freedom. It is an unvarying law that strength grows out of resistance. If we pity the poor blacksmith who swings a 5-pound hammer all day long, we must also admire the wonderful arm that he develops in doing it. Because of the dual constitution of all things, in labor as in life, there can be no cheating, says Emerson. The thief steals from himself. The swindler swindles himself. For the real price of labor is knowledge and virtue, whereof wealth and credit are signs. The signs, like paper money, may be counterfeited or stolen, but that which they represent, namely, knowledge and virtue, cannot be counterfeited or stolen. Henry Ford receives 15,000 letters a week from people who are begging for a part of his wealth. Yet how few of these poor ignorant souls understand that Ford's real wealth is not measured by the dollars he has in the bank, nor the factories he owns, but by the reputation he has gained through the rendering of useful service at a reasonable price. And how did he gain that reputation? Certainly not by rendering as little service as possible and collecting for it all he could filch from the purchasers. The very warp and woof of Ford's business philosophy is this: give the people the best product at the lowest price possible. When other automobile manufacturers raise their prices, Ford lowers his. When other employers lower wages, Ford increases them. What has happened? This policy has placed the law of increasing returns back of Ford so effectively that he has become the richest and most powerful man in the world. Oh, you foolish and short-sighted seekers after wealth, who are returning from the daily chase empty-handed, why do you not take a lesson from men like Ford? Why do you not reverse your philosophy and give an order that you may get? I am finishing this lesson on Christmas Eve. In the room next to my study, our children are decorating their Christmas tree, and the rhythm of their voices falls as music upon my ears. They are happy, not alone because they expect to receive, but for the deeper reason that they have presents hidden away which they expect to give. From the window of my study, I can see the neighbors' children as they, too, are gleefully engaged in preparing for this wonderful event. Throughout the civilized world, millions of people are preparing to celebrate the birth of this Prince of Peace who, more than any other man, set forth the reasons why it is more blessed to give than to receive, and why enduring happiness comes not from possessing material wealth, but from rendering service to humanity. It seems a queer coincidence that the completion of this particular lesson should have happened on Christmas Eve, yet I am glad that it has. for this has provided me with sufficient justification for reminding you that nowhere in the entire history of civilization could I have found stronger support of the fundamentals of this lesson than may be found in the Sermon on the Mount. In the book of Matthew, Christianity is one of the greatest and most far-reaching influences in the world today, and I hardly need apologize for reminding you that the tenets of Christ's philosophy are in absolute harmony with the fundamentals upon which this lesson, in the main, is founded. As I see the happy faces of the children and watch the hurrying crowds of belated Christmas shoppers, all radiant with the splendor of the spirit of giving, I cannot help wishing that every eve was Christmas Eve. For then this would be a better world in which the struggle for existence would be reduced to a minimum, and hatred and strife outlawed. Life is but a short span of years at best. Like a candle we are lighted, flicker for a moment, and then go out. If we were placed here for the purpose of laying up treasures for use in a life that lies beyond the dark shadow of death, may it not be possible that we can best collect these treasures by rendering all the service we can, to all the people we can, in a loving spirit of kindness and sympathy? I hope you agree with this philosophy. Here this lesson must end, but it is by no means completed. Where I lay down the chain of thought, it is now your duty to take it up and develop it, in your own way, and to your own benefit. By the very nature of the subject of this lesson, it can never be finished, for it leads into the heart of all human activities. Its purpose is to cause you to take the fundamentals upon which it is based and use them as a stimulus that will cause your mind to unfold, thereby releasing the latent forces that are yours. This lesson was not written for the purpose of teaching you, but it was intended as a means of causing you to teach yourself one of the great truths of life. It was intended as a source of education, in the true sense of educing, drawing out, developing from within, those forces of mind which are available for your use. When you deliver the best service of which you are capable, striving each time to excel all your previous efforts, you are making use of the highest form of education. Therefore, when you render more service and better service than that for which you are paid, you, more than anyone else, are profiting by the effort. It is only through the delivery of such service that mastery in your chosen field of endeavor can be attained. For this reason, you should make it a part of your definite chief aim to endeavor to surpass all previous records in all that you do. Let this become a part of your daily habits, and follow it with the same regularity with which you eat your meals. Make it your business to render more service and better service than that for which you are paid, and lo, before you realize what has happened, you will find that the world is willingly paying you for more than you do. Compound interest upon compound interest is the rate that you will be paid for such service. Just how this pyramiding of gains takes place is left entirely to you to determine. Now, what are you going to do with that which you have learned from this lesson? And when? And how? And why? This lesson can be of no value to you unless it moves you to adopt and use the knowledge it has brought you. Knowledge becomes power only through organization and use. Do not forget this. You can never become a leader without doing more than you are paid for, and you cannot become successful without developing leadership in your chosen occupation.